These two franchises share an idea that can cure or at least ameliorate depression. And the reason I believe so starting off is that these two franchises, looking back, have been monoliths of our current culture, being one of the oldest forms of media still relevant today, making multiple spin-offs with varying success, dating back to the 60s with The Hobbit being in the 30s, and now both almost 70 years old. You might think that's not impressive, but when you look back at the absolute mass of media, which you might have forgotten even if you just watched it 2 hours ago. These two series have been ingrained in the heads of multiple people and our current culture. You can remember Gandalf to Mount Doom, and from Dr. Octavius to Peter Parker holding the door for a criminal. They are pillars of their own genres, with Tolkien being the godfather of his own genre, creating races like elves, dwarves, orcs, and goblins. And the fact that they're still being used to this day sort of speaks magnitudes of what he created. And Spider-Man is always the top favorite hero out of tens of thousands of Marvel heroes, and me also receiving the same feedback in my other video. The main reason as to why they hold relevance to this day is because they teach you values that can cure and ameliorate depression. That way that they teach you is by being responsible, determined, and brave. And for clarity's sake, I will have Lord of the Rings be my main chronological narrative, and I will just reference Spider-Man in between the trilogy, mainly because there's a lot of depictions of Spider-Man that can make it confusing. Regardless, each sort of had their own approaches, but is very similar if not identical in vision. So let me start off explaining with the Fellowship of the Ring. When we begin, we're introduced to Bilbo, Frodo, the rest of the hobbits, and their way of life. They've seen nothing but the Shire, and all the hobbits are
quite content to ignore and be ignored by the world of the big folk.
Because they are
neither renowned as great warriors, nor counted among the very wise.
It's relatable to be like hobbits, compared to other movies that they say that they're chosen ones or destined for greatness or given a miracle opportunity or initial gift. Hobbits give the subversive message that we could achieve whatever our main characters could do. And Frodo was never special to begin with, yet he was given the task to carry all the evil in the world.
What must I do?
Initially, this task was to carry it to Rivendell, which they barely accomplished, and even looking back at it, it was just a small trek in the largest journey that they'll have. And Frodo and Sam already have doubts if they belong anywhere but the Shire. However, the decision for the council was to have the ring destroyed, from Sauron already knowing where the ring is and Saruman already being corrupted. Because there was no one else to properly take the ring, Frodo took the responsibility to take the ring. It was the hardest task anyone could do, especially for a hobbit. Therefore, the Fellowship was created. However, they were consistently given difficulties in their path ahead, not only from enemies and death, but also internally, Boromir being the main one affected. Frodo's burden was too much even for the rest of the Fellowship. Frodo had this realization when he saw the effect of the ring on Gollum, yet Gandalf gave this quote that changed his mind.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil. Bilbo was meant to find the ring, in which case you also were meant to have it. And that is an encouraging thought.
It's one of the heavily referenced quotes in which, whether you believe it by fate or a deity or random chance, you were given this task of responsibility. And you might hate this idea of being responsible, but it's encouraging because you yourself were given this opportunity to change the world for the better. You yourself have the choice in your hands to make things right, to accept responsibility forthright, with pride that you have the greatest ability to change the world for the better, to take as much responsibility onto yourself so that you can do the best you can, because if you don't, evil will take over. And to take this back, it's very similar to Uncle Ben's famous quote.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
It carries a similar vision to what Gandalf said, but with a slightly more concerning tone. However, it's more condensed with greater importance. Peter Parker has the ability to do good. I believe even if you're not a spider-slaying genius, you still have the choice and capability to do good or bad of your own free will. And this free will and power means you have to be responsible with it. You might not have superpowers or the most powerful ring in the world, but you can choose to make things worse. A lot worse than what you think. Peter choosing to let the thief go just to make himself feel better and avoid accountability shows that it can cause terrible outcomes, yet he was able to stop him so easily. That's why you have a responsibility to use your powers and capabilities the best way possible, because you can let bad things happen that could have been stopped. And this is also reflected when Frodo talked to Galadriel in Lothlorien. She showed him the future if he failed, what would happen, what would continue to happen if he didn't destroy the ring. The best option is not comfort and happiness, but to be responsible, and in some ways you will find happiness in that. And same again, this message is repeated yet reflected the best in Spider-Man 2 and also in Spider-Man No Way Home. Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker is tired of having his life deteriorate because no one else can be like Spider-Man. However, if he left his heroism behind, what would replace it is the evil that could have been prevented. So it's important to take on that role and sacrifice having an easy life like everyone else because no one can be like him, even if that meant giving up on MJ. And even with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, which I believe the ending was the best depiction of what Spider-Man should be. Unlike the rest of the Spider-Man movies, they all had a tragic experience and tried to figure out how to be Spider-Man. Tom Holland's Peter Parker is special in which he never had a backstory. He was basically handheld into being a superhero by Tony and the rest of the Avengers until the end. What turned the previous two into Spider-Man was the punishment of their own lack of responsibility. This Peter Parker never really had that experience. This Peter always sort of had what he wanted: MJ, school, MIT acceptance, and his anonymity. But he realized at the end, it shouldn't be about his own self-satisfaction that is important, but to do the responsible thing even if it's at the cost of your own happiness. In doing so, he can keep everyone safe, and he no longer relies on anyone else. He's now grown and become his own adult, having the suit he made on his own instead of the ones made by Tony. To carry responsibility is the way to grow and keep away the worst things from happening. It's shown to be true from an external viewpoint of the world, but also an introspective view of yourself. When doing research for this video, I took a look at a couple of studies of depression and suicide notes. In the contents of the suicide notes, a vast majority of them either absolved blame or put the blame on themselves. Some were depressive, some were angry. However, a prevalent recurring factor was their expression of shame, guilt, and hopelessness, being sorry for what they did and what they would do. And I really believe that the main cure for this is to be responsible, because they felt they were useless, guilty, and sorry for holding people down, that they wouldn't have any hope or impact on the world and their surroundings. The cure for that is to make the effort to no longer be useless, to no longer hold people down, and take that opportunity to make an impact on the world. You might think that your impact is too small or it's impossible to break free of your own pit that you're in, but like in Gandalf's quote, it's what you do with the time that is given to you. And I believe it's more honorable of you to aim up and die trying knowing you gave it your best, than to let yourself down, give up, and be forgotten forever. It's better to make it up for yourself than to feel hopeless. It doesn't matter who you are or how much you do, so long as you take as much responsibility onto yourself and that you start somewhere. And before I go on to the second movie, I would like to dedicate a short section to The Ring. The Ring is almost like a check on how he truly achieved something good. The reason why hobbits are resilient to the Ring is because their value structure is different. Hobbits were never destined for greatness, never warriors, nor wise, nor achievers. They only care for the small things in life. They don't have or want power. Many other creatures fall to the corruption of the Ring though, because they have aspirations, values, and honor. The Ring towards people is a corrupting voice that speaks to your own desires. It tells Aragorn that with the Ring it can make him the greatest king and restore mankind. Boromir believes that they can also use the Ring for mankind against Sauron. It also didn't help that he was goaded by his father thinking he was destined for greatness. You should also be careful because we ourselves can be easily persuaded. We have our own aspirations, dreams, and even willing to climb to the top of our hierarchy, whether it be in sports, our groups, or work. The troubling thing is that most of the time you won't even know what you're doing wrong or choose the wrong side. When accepting responsibility, you must be careful and cognizant of what you decide. You should be on the side of doing the responsible thing, not about what you want. If you want to be aware and be good, you have to be like hobbits. We have to be modest and accept what we have, to not overvalue what we want, but only to do what is right for the task at hand, to do what is good, even if it's at the cost of yourself. And we can bring this back to Spider-Man and even other superhero movies, but let's stick with Spider-Man for a second. The people that Spider-Man faces do have power like him, just in different ways, whether it be by money, intelligence, or some supernatural ability. And similarly enough, many of them are blindsided by their goals, personal aspirations, and revenge. Each and every one has powers, yet practically all of them turn to villains. Peter is the only one left because he decides to choose the path of responsibility. He chooses his social obligation over his own personal gains. This also means him hiding his identity, even if Peter could benefit from revealing it, like sponsorships and advertisements, like in many other series. To sacrifice your own personal goals and even your romantic interests. That's what made Peter a hero. That's what made Frodo, Sam, and Aragorn a hero. That's what can make you a hero. I believe The Two Towers, while still being greatly received, is still an underrated film of the trilogy. It was about the importance of absolute perseverance for fighting for what's right. It is the continuation after accepting that responsibility and the difficulties that might come along with it. The Two Towers tried to set so much impending doom onto us, which makes the first movie sound like a refresher, showing the possible end of Rohan and mankind alike. Frodo slowly being corrupted from the ring, turning on Sam. And this is the call to responsibility for both Merry and Pippin, wanting to help as well, but at the same time faced with doom, thinking that they're nothing but hobbits.
We don't belong here, Merry. It's too big for us. What can we do in the end? We've got the Shire. Maybe we should go.
It starts to look bleak, but at the end, it's this speech that made Sam a favorite of most.
It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. This shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to, Sam? There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for.
It is a very inspirational speech, which is similar to my message about perseverance and determination in my Batman video, in which you should never give up and continue to fight regardless of how bad it gets, because if you're the last one, you'll still be fighting for good. The only way to have a good outcome is to keep going. And mankind did have their victory. Merry and Pippin deserve to be helping in the war, and evil will pass. I would also like to reference this for Spider-Man. In the night Gwen Stacy dies, and the shock from this had never worn away. It was a very iconic moment which was played for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, which I believe they probably handled the ending pretty well, where even if you have rough times, the best would be to continue forth and fulfill your responsibilities regardless of what happens to you, not by hiding the tragedy away, but of acceptance and determination to move forward, because people still rely on you, and moving forward makes you much stronger than you were before. The last movie is widely the highest received out of all the three movies, and I also agree with this sentiment as well, and it's one of my main outgoing messages for this video. When taking on responsibility, there's many fears and doubts of what you take on. It's understandable, it's difficult, and it's troubling, but the best way to take responsibility is with bravery. It's important to take on that responsibility with courage because that's what gives you the motivation to do something right without cutting corners. It makes you stronger as a human being. If you're able to advance constantly with bravery, then you can achieve greater than what you are. There are so many depictions, which I will take 3 of the best captured moments in this movie. The first in order is the ride of the Rohirrim. It's one of the most courageous actions when directly faced with death. They chant, accepting and heading straight into death itself, to sacrifice for a greater purpose, the ultimate price to pay, and to take it on with bravery. Another display of courage is with Sam. When he carried Frodo up Mount Doom, it was almost unnecessary for him to carry Frodo, already being exhausted himself. However, he went above and farther beyond than what he needed to do. For Frodo, for his friends, for the people counting on them, and for the good of the world. It was truly a selfless, courageous act. Tolkien was very inspired by multiple religions and mythology. Being a devout Catholic, he was inspired from examples of Norse mythology and Judeo-Christian religious moral values. The 2 examples can be considered by interviewers and multiple people as Christ-like, and I don't disagree with that sentiment, in which the idea is to take as much of the burden onto yourself like Frodo and to accept death like the men of Rohan. You could even consider the end of the Fellowship where Frodo takes the ring full-heartedly as an act of bravery and Christ-like. Sam carrying Frodo would also be a similar image to Simon of Cyrene, who helped carry the cross of Christ up the hill. The third display is slightly different, but I do believe it shows the capability of humans altogether. It was at the coronation of Aragorn, which was a favorite for so many people, which you already know, where the 4 hobbits bow to the king as the kindest gesture that they can give as small hobbits, and yet the expectations were completely subverted.
You bow to no one.
The real heroes were not men, nor elves, nor dwarves, nor wizards. It was small halflings, because they were the bravest out of every race, even if they were told they were never renowned as great warriors or counted among the very wise.
Let me turn to another subject for a moment. Frodo accepts the burden of the ring. Yeah. And he embodies, as a character, the virtues of long-suffering and perseverance, and by his actions, one might almost say, in the Buddhist sense, he acquires merit. He becomes, in fact, almost a Christ figure. Why did you choose a halfling, a hobbit, for this role?
Well, I didn't do much choosing. I wrote the Hobbit choosing. All I was trying to do in the role was just to carry on from the point where the Hobbit left off. Well, then I got hobbits on my hands, didn't I?
Indeed, but there's nothing particularly Christ-like about Bilbo.
Oh, no. No.
It seemed to me strange that this small hobbit from a small and
I shouldn't say that he was Christ-like. I think as a personally, but of course he has some of the features of Christ. I guess accepting of a
Perhaps I've exaggerated.
Accepting a burden, but because you...
But in the face of the most appalling danger, he struggles on and continues and wins through.
But that seems... Well, I thought it was more like an addict of the human race. I've always been impressed. We're here surviving because of the indomitable courage of quite small people against impossible odds. Jungles, volcanoes, wild beasts. They struggle on, almost blindly in a way.
And it's also the same vision from Into the Spider-Verse, the leap of faith. or to be brave and courageous. Miles wanted a step-by-step tutorial on how to be Spider-Man, but in reality there really isn't. The only way is to take the responsibility with determination and full-heartedness. To jump into responsibility and move into adulthood requires that leap of faith. To do it halfway doesn't turn you into the hero the world needs. And I'm going to sort of jump back and forth everywhere for this, but I believe it's not directly talked about in the specific conversation of this. But in Batman vs Superman, even if there were some fans of the movie, it wasn't the best received superhero film, and there was a lot of criticism about the characters, the plot, and just a lot more. There was a video explaining that Schneider was more obsessed with the moments and filled the entire movie trying to hit one. Well, if you throw enough darts onto the dartboard, you're bound to hit a bullseye. And I believe this single dialogue captures what I'm trying to talk to you about.
That's fear. You're not brave. Men are brave.
We are a fragile species and we're fearful of not only physical pain but social consequences. That's what separates us from the rest of life itself. Even if we have fear, we choose to overcome the fear and fight back. It's something that's sort of encapsulated and talked to people subversively in the rise or movement of masculinity. People joining weightlifting and boxing, each with their own twist of message, and you can interpret, agree, or disagree with them however you want. But what I would say is that they're tapping into an instinct that I've been trying to explain, that you should be brave and courageous. I personally believe that this rise of masculinity is because for a long time our world has been the safest we've ever been. We don't need to go outside and be brave. Not even to step out of our comfort zones and to talk to new people. We've already had brave people do the work for us. That's why I also believe that there's a bunch of people moving back to this movement because they feel like there's something missing, because we've always had it within us. And I do wish for you to share this sentiment. You don't need to go to boxing or weightlifting or even follow with whatever these people are saying, but instead extend out of your comfort zone to accept a burden and to take a responsibility to help someone else. Because even if you think you're smaller than you think you might be, so long as you gain the courage and bravery to do something, you can do the right thing and accomplish great things. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Put on the mask, accept the ring, take responsibility, achieve, and be brave.
I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
race.